Thank you very much. I'm thrilled by the level of energy in this room. I think we can all feel it today. My name is John Stomberg. I'm the Virginia Rice Kelsey 1961 S Director of the museum. And it's my pleasure to take the moderator role for our next panel. And I'm joined by two dear friends on this panel. And I'm really grateful to be able to have the opportunity to talk about art with them. They're people that are really in part of like how I frame my world and think about art, because I've known them for a while. This next panel was dreamed up because of an observation of mine, now that I'm north of 30, that I've lived through painting's death about 5 times, I think. And it's just become boring, really. And so what I really find interesting is that the original medium, I mean, you go way, way, way back and you find people living in the wilderness, living in caves and taking mud and making images on the wall with mud. And it was like one of those very first artistic impulses that we've ever had as a species. And it continues to be vital and viable and vibrant and variant today. And so that was the idea of this panel was, what is it? Why is it? How is that possible that we can still look at a painting and immediately say, oh, that's Jane Hammond, oh, that's Bahar Behbahani. You know, they're totally different, and yet we've been doing this for millennia. So with that, we invited 2 people with work on the wall. Some of you know we actually had a third member of this panel who we love and respect very much, who can't be here for health reasons. Obiora Udechukwu sends his regards, and we are all brokenhearted that he couldn't join us today, and wish him a speedy recovery, because he is a really wonderful person, and his painting is the centerpiece of the whole museum right now. But now it is my pleasure to introduce to you somebody who a lot of people in this audience already know. Because we were recently favored by doing a show for her at Hood Downtown, a one-person show for Bahar that was organized by Smooth, who's still in this room as well. And that show was really fabulous. Bahar is an artist who is absolutely rocketing right now in her career. Things are just coming together. It seems like every couple of days I hear some other great piece of news about her career. So Bahar got her MFA and her BFA in Tehran and has been here for a long time. She's got another show coming up in Tehran called Oasis Under Construction, and you'll see how thematically tied in to her work that really is. She's done many shows on the theme of the garden, and I'm very pleased to announce, and this might be the first public announcing of this, although it's on the internet, but nobody reads the internet, that she's been selected as a 2019 Creative Capital Award recipient. So. That's as good as it gets, so I'll stop there and let you talk. But please welcome up our dear friend, Bahar Behbahani.
Wow, that is very dreamy. Such a nice feeling. Yeah, it's the news of this new museum been around for a while, and everybody knows John Stomberg, knows how passionate he's been about it, and everything that he said about it, I believed, but you know, I was like, I have to see what's happening. So when yesterday we came and had a brief tour, and I saw like how thoughtfully, or it's better to say how thought-provocatively, just really put together the artworks, and it just made me so honored and proud to be part of this family. And as you imagined it as a neighborhood, I'm very happy with my neighborhood. So thanks for having me back. Oh, I'm supposed to change the slide. research as mark making might sound a little confusing, but since we are in the spirit of the museum in the college, and I've been here before with the wonderful students and faculties and other creative-minded people, I thought maybe I learn more myself if I bring the process of my working and a couple of other works too. And the reason that I'm doing is because I really value the process of the work more than the final product, to be honest. And please forgive me if it might just sound a little bit slow or boring. I always say that I'm a slow cook, so everything has to go together. I also grew up in a household that my father was a writer. The most popular TV series writer from 70s to 90s in Iran. And then whenever I went to him and it's just like 11 a.m. in the morning and he's sitting there or doing nothing. I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? He's like, I'm brewing. So we come from a culture that we have to brew. So I thought maybe I show how I brew my paintings. Just a little background, maybe it's good, about how my recent research practice shaped up. For the last 5 years, my focus has been in landscape, and particularly cultural landscapes. And by saying cultural landscape, I mean a geographic area that particularly includes cultural resources and natural resources associated with the interactions between nature and human behavior. So, for example, gardens. I'm under the history of education. I think that it pertains to as scarcity, displacement, environment history, poetry, of course. And I'm not quite clear how these are connected together, but bear with me, please. We get somewhere together. So landscape and garden, I sort of centered it as a rubric for myself, and I think it as not as a destination, but as sort of a garden is a rubric that allows me to tap into many social political issues that I can excavate actually to get there. I look into gardens through literature, horticultural texts, travel books from 16th centuries, cartography, water traces. My understanding of things is not necessarily literal. Through all these materials or information, I'm trying to kind of re-enter those histories, and I see the history itself as an abstract form too. So for me, it's more I read, I research, I gather the information, and I see these things as more like a point of questioning, not necessarily learning or understanding something rigid. These are examples that not necessarily my final product, but it's I constantly draw, and I understanding things by drawing. And I think drawing for me is a meditative way that when I read about the phenomena of landscape or geopolitics of the garden or the architectural around water structure, I just try to see how I can diagram it, slice it, enlarging, abstracting, detailing, describing, distancing. And I call this then the whole collective that I have maybe hundreds, thousands of them, my drawing library. So in a way, it's my vocabulary for my other projects, which can be painting, video. It's my encyclopedia of understanding things, and it's my visual culture that I make around it. this constant interdisciplinary exploration of the subject for gardens took me to a lot of other processes like copying, blueprinting, Islamic astronomy, science of orientation and positioning as us like for digging wells in ancient gardens. So I just put together like many other disciplines to just make this understanding more experiential for myself. But then I have to really step back and unlearn what I learned. That's the most important part of my job, because I actually like use a lot of time of researching and reading, and this definitely when I work it doesn't come useful in a way that if I want to use it directly. So I have to get step back. And another thing that I wanted to mention here that might be also good for the students and the people that on the way to, because I also sensed like some questions that it was on the other panels from students. In the parallel with public history, I always go back to my personal history. And at the beginning, it might just even like sounds like irrelative or like boring, or like as someone asked, like who cares that what it is? It doesn't matter. The matter is you have to be connected with your core and with your what you know from the phenomenal. So if I talk about the politics of the gardens, first I have to go back to the garden that I grew up. First I have to go like exactly study and explore like what kind of garden now my mother lives in, to understand it better, to touch me. Then when it touches you, then you can just bring it to the broader aspect of it. So this picture is like from my mother's complex building that live, and this one is like a 16th century, 19th century lithography by Eugène Flandin, the French archaeologist / politician, made of Persian garden. So I put this together, and this all goes to their own drawers in my brain to come back at some point. When I'm full steam in the studio to paint, all these layers of research process comes to different layers of the work. It's a whole experiential activity. My physical body is just really comes to the communication with the work. And when I'm talking about that is really like I have to just put all those research and information in a very intuitive, spontaneous, or sometimes subconscious way to work with it. It's a lot of layers, it's a lot of uncertainty and doubt, which actually I cherish that, because I think that's the most important part of us as artists, to doubt, to question, to be uncertain. Because as soon as you're certain about something, you block the other alternative or other answers. You block like collaboration with other people because you're certain. But the good things comes from uncertainty. And I learned from that. When I was younger, I was afraid of that. Now I'm better. That means I'm older. And then when I get, for example, to this image, that is part of the 8 pieces that it was in my Hoodtown museum show too, it's a very minimal, it's an expression, but it's just really like, it's that moment of mindfulness that all those knowledge come to you to just make this happen. It's kind of like recontextualizing yourself through like, I would say, proximity. And this proximity, I think, activates my work a lot in different senses. I'm a filmmaker too, and sometimes I feel like the time is very important in my work. The way that I see things sometimes in sequences, but like I'm a filmmaker, that my films are not linear or narrative. So it's just I bring that as a tool for my work to just see different angles of something. So I just like, I think like this macro approach to something, to a seed, to a cartography of something from above, Google Earth, going inside, go to the construction site, go like to all over around this garden that you want to show it. That's like, it gives me like freedom when it comes to some different pieces. This is a detail of that look at geopolitics of Persian gardens, and which I've been very critical about the historiography and the way that in other panels we talk about Orientalism and the gaze of the Westerns. And the whole series started in 2013 for me when I started reading some travel books from Europeans that traveled to Persia in 16th, 17th centuries. And then I followed like how they romanticized the idea of Persian garden. Anyway, that a long story. It needs another symposium. We will do it later. This is from the same series that I reimagined the mapping. I've been always been also critical about like who makes the maps and why they makes these borders like this, and why the Europeans made the first maps for the Middle Easterns or from the east side of the world. So I'm reimagining them. We don't have time, I guess, to go through the technique of that and how I enlarged them and how geographically it's reimagined. I'm sorry about that. Can do it later. This is part of the same series. With all of that that I talked about, like Persian garden is like as a frame for me, so then I can just tap into other issues. One of the issues that I'm very interested about is about like how we manage water and water structure. Not only in the world, not only in the region that I grew up, or like in the ancient time, or like the Islamic solution for that in the ancient time, but also in the world. And this politics around water is just never ending. And I see more and more that I'm very much interested in the connectivity of all these subjects that I said, but through us, through human beings, through how we connect with each other, the things that we know. And water is really like, I see like we are like all the rivers or the stream of water that at the end of the day we join together. So I look at different structures of water. These are from the different series here that I brought, that I go quickly through it because they are like from different period of my work. I just wanted to show you that how I sometimes was just like closer to the abstract language to show infrastructure of water in different parts of the world. Or like sometimes meticulously make like this spiritual aspect of water for the places that they are arid era and they don't have water, and how they manage that scarcity to abundance, for example, in Iran. This is from the same series, and there are again the many drawings that it comes with, the notions that I'm thinking about from Renaissance to today about how we protect water, what is the territory of that, what is bordering, reflecting, mismanagement of sources, and so on, so that we can talk about it for hours. And this is from the series that John mentioned, that I'm gonna have like this show in Tehran that is Oasis under construction. It started from my research visit last year to Tehran and Shiraz. Shiraz is the city of gardens. That is like all the ancient gardens are in Shiraz. So Shiraz has got gardens, poetry, and wine. And after Islamic Revolution, doesn't have wine anymore. After revolution, war, sanctions with America, gardens are disappearing too because we have like water problem a lot. So I saw literally the gardens under construction. So I called it Oasis under construction, and then also the form is coming in more the formation of the pools. This is a picture of another work of the series. I think I have to just speed it up. Also, I wanted to say that I do some performative installations that is related to painting and water. So maybe we can just see a little bit of that. I did this performance a couple of months ago at Impact Troy. It's a very immersive installation with 5 giant screens. And what I do, I perform live with utilizing water and ink and bringing on top of the film that I shot in Shiraz last year. And the water really interacting with the city. And sadly, I got informed the same day that I was doing that, Shiraz went under a serious flood. And that's like another urgency that I feel I'm in tune with the word of climate change and environmental justice and other things. Sorry, I'm just speeding up a little bit. I'm just switching to another thing very quickly. Ironically, my formal education about Persian gardens, it started in the University of Tehran in the 90s, is influenced by American architectural historians Donald Wilbur. 5 years ago, I revisited his books, and my point of research concentrated on the literature of Persian gardens and garden pavilions written by Wilbur in 1962. He surveyed many gardens, and that none of the Iranians did. He had like this huge passion for gardens in Iran. He spent like more than 25 years in Iran and the Middle East in archaeology, and particularly in Persian garden and architecture around it. In 2013, while in my studio and working on this Persian garden series, I encountered an article in New York Times from 2000 that revealed US declassified documents detailing the CIA secret operation in 1953 military coup. So fast forward, I had to just deal with this when I found out that the writer of this report of the coup was Donald Wilbur. So my Donald Wilbur was the CIA agent and the mastermind of the coup. And what I made, it was a series of paintings and installations that is going back to the redaction of CIA and this dark moment of the history of Iran. It's the darkest moment, I would say, which impacted until today. We don't talk about it, how the American people also is affecting by that even today. So Garden Coup traveled to China in Shanghai Biennale and traveled to Moscow, and I called it The Color of Oil Never Lies, and we don't have time to say why, but I utilized actually Russian soil on the work this time. And I was hoping that I can sell the idea to Russians that this is an archaeological ecosystem work. Of course, they didn't believe. And the CIA report that I used to embed on the soil, after a year and a half, is still on limbo, and we don't know where they are. They never mailed it to me, and it's somewhere between Moscow and US. So I use Persian gardens as a metaphor for politics and poetics, as you may see. These are other. But here, that is very important if I have 1 minute. This is my show at the Hood Downtown in 2017, and the reason that I brought it here and I wanted to talk about it is because this show is really it was a turning point for my studio, conceptually, intellectually, and in many more other ways. And that's why it's just very emotional for me to get back. Let the Garden Aram Flourish was curated by Smooth Nzebi that unfortunately left. And it came to the picture with a very strong and generous support of the most collaborative team of Dartmouth and Hood Museum. I can't thank enough with all the designers and smart, creative-minded that they really came to expand my horizon. So that the way that I looked at this body of work was very interdisciplinary in terms of, like, I made installation, I made videos, and what the most important thing, Smooth, I wanted to say nudged me, but really pushed me to make a timeline for Persian Garden. And at the beginning, I was just a little bit defensive, and I said, I'm not a historian, I can't direct. And he said, no, wait, make your own timeline. And that really made me think about the timeline of Persian Garden, of my Persian Garden. And I cooked the idea since then, and this is part of that timeline that is shows like how personal and public history goes together. And since then, and again, thanks to the educational program of the Dartmouth and Hood Museum, I really got engaged with many students and many local people, and I learned that how is important this in charge of the community. And it's really changed my practice in my studio. And since then, I've done like many workshops around the water rituals, water issues with many students around the country. And finally, now I see Persian Gardens as a community garden, which is mark making, my mark making. And I'm hoping that I'm making a public garden in New York City, a Persian garden that is humble and real, a community garden that hopefully will bring a new narrative to our society. And where I'm standing here, I'm really hoping and kind of like trust and believing that you all will be a part of it, an active part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bahar. So my next speaker literally has a CV too long to read in the next hour. So I will, and she's 21, which is really kind of amazing that she's done all this already. She does have 2 MFAs, which makes her a little unique there. But also, I think what I want to point out on her CV is, in addition to all the many awards and recognitions that she's had, the countless shows, but the part I wanted to point out was the collections that contain her work, because her work is all over the place. And it's a real incredible acknowledgement of the reception that her work has had, that so many institutions have stepped up, not just to show her work on a temporary basis, but to bring it into the collection. And that's a really big part of what we're talking about today. It's a huge part of the honor of being close to Jane, is knowing her work and knowing how we share our work with people and how people all over the world share her work. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that she's very well known in the artist community as being generous with various board times, with artist committees and that sort of thing. She's really pulled her share many times. And those of you who know what she's done know what I'm speaking of. She's a great member of our community and of the artist community, and she's now a member of our family in a bigger way. We've long had some of her photographs, but we now have a large-scale painting, and we're thrilled to have stepped up our commitment to her work. So with that, I present Jane Hammond, artist extraordinaire.
Thank you, everyone. It's really nice to be here. The museum is beautiful, the installation is beautiful, and it's a great honor and pleasure to be part of this symposium today. I spent the first 10 years that I lived in New York, they would be 79 to 89, kind of trying to figure out what kind of artist I was. And one of the things, I probably looked at more art in those days than I do now, And one of the things I didn't want to do was have a really clearly defined personal style, something that was recognizable and easy to identify. A, it felt overly commodified to me, and I didn't think that's what art was really about. B, it seemed antithetical to the complexities of life. C, it seemed at odds with all the interests I have. I wouldn't know which interest to excise to figure out what my personal style would be. So I set out to create for myself something that was instead what I call a surrogate for style. Part of this is that I also supported myself for 10 years with a teaching job in Baltimore, Maryland. So I commuted from New York City to Baltimore weekly, and I spent all my evenings, I ate out of the vending machines, believe it or not, and I spent all my evenings in the library, in those days Xeroxing and sort of amassing a personal library of imagery and language and information I was interested in. So I decided for myself that instead of having a restricted set of interests, I would let myself make anything I wanted. I would organize for myself a lexicon of 276 numbered found images drawn from a great variety of things. I would restrict myself to 6 colors and a few rectangular sizes, and then I would let myself make any kind of painting I wanted in this information, in these colors. It was as if instead of relishing the idea of building a circle around myself, which is how I see style, and staying in the center of it and mining that territory inside the circle, I decided that what I wanted to build was a path where I could see a little bit ahead of myself, but I couldn't see around the next corner. And I was going to commit myself to a life of exploration and discovery and change. Some paintings I made in the early years, I'd say 3 or 4 of a couple of hundred, referenced alchemy. I liked the idea, I'm drawn to complex systems, and I like the idea of transformation, and I see sort of parallels between what painting is, where you take physical materials and hopefully transmute them, and what alchemy is. And you'll see, for example, at the top there's a little white sphere. Then I fell in love in 1989, if you can believe it, with the Swedish painter Hilma af Klint, who's now having her heyday at the Guggenheim. And I made this, I was having a show in Sweden in 1989, and I made this painting and kind of carried it over to Sweden with me as an homage to her. I think one curator who I met for 5 minutes kind of was on to what I was doing. And I was very interested in plumbing the grammar of painting and visual language. So for example, when I made this painting, which was in the Jewish Museum's Houdini show a couple of years ago, I was thinking about the idea of a giant circle inside of a giant rectangle, a body on a rope, bringing out of itself, as a painter brings meaning into the world, another body on another rope. I made a lot of works of art that reference magic because it too is about transformation, taking something and making it into something else. And you see this image of the finger inside the puppet. This idea of, it relates to the painting upstairs, this idea of a being inside of another being or a thing inside of another thing is very appealing to me. And sometimes I reference language itself, what we commonly mean by language. So this was a found phrase from Lewis Carroll. Some of the things in my lexicon were language. A prudent man shuns hyenas, seems true on the face of it. And then I took all these phrases and teased them out of the main phrase. In other words, the letters had to exist in the phrase. And then after doing that, I associated things with them. So you'll see shape huts comes out of prudent man, and you'll see this kind of thing that looks like an igloo, but it's actually a child's ceramic model. So it's sort of a meta igloo. Beneath that is Popeye's hat turned into a kind of piece of architecture. So there were a couple of these paintings. You could see how a person could make I had 42 phrases from Lewis Carroll. I could have made 42 of these paintings, but the series idea is not that interesting to me. So this is the painting that's upstairs. It's very thrilling to see it here. I was telling John it's been in a living room in Detroit for the last 30 years. But the things I think of when I see this painting are this idea of a being inside of another being. To me, it's sort of a metaphor for painting, that painting is a kind of costume or thing that I build around myself each time, and that I inhabit it. I'm secretly locked in and embedded inside there, but it's a little bit different each time. And that also rhymes with the idea that the igloo is kind of a meta-igloo. There's also a little log cabin down there, so that has a relationship with the igloo. I think of the moon as having a relationship with Mars. So there are all these kind of binaries in there for me. This is a painting that when I made it also lives in Detroit. I was thinking about it as a painting about painting itself, that there was this mythological, we call it content, psychological, narrative aspect of painting. And then there were these geometric principles like Cézanne talked about, and that all painting is a kind of a dialogue, or much painting is a kind of, certainly my painting, a dialogue between these things. This is a painting I made after reading Francis Yates's book, The Art of Memory, which is a history of mnemonic devices, in which they talk about people remembering things by picturing complex architectural spaces. I made several paintings where I took phrases that I had gleaned from my favorite sentences collection and married the phrases and the images together. I've used the ventriloquist image a number of times because to me it has, again, to do with like indirect speaking, that you speak through another. You can see the ventriloquist here too. And this is all, sometimes I don't completely know, like, I was almost finished with this painting before I realized, oh yeah, it's a painting about sound. And then I made a painting about smell after that. And then you can see how the same image is kind of like, now he's a kind of animal trainer and he's directing these. This is the closest we talked about horror vacui at lunch with the students. This is about the emptiest painting I've ever made. I grant you quickly, it's not very empty. And sometimes I've used this more layered reality. In the base image here is a group of people collecting octopi, and something about them picking up the octopus with their hands kind of rhymes with puppetry in my mind. So I was playing back and forth between those two associations. I made a couple of paintings that reference my whole process itself, and this is one where I'm pretending I'm Esther Williams. It's a little conceited on my part. And then I have this lexicon around me of all my images. Of course, it wasn't until I finished the painting that I realized they were all male. And then they're each kind of shouting, kind of deli style, the numbers that they were assigned to be. So I did this for quite a long time, and what I forgot to tell you is that I had given a number to every image. So a painting like the Phrenology had this title, Untitled, and like 27 numbers. And one day I got up and I decided it would be fun to have language associated with my paintings, that is, to have titles. And my idea was to commission them, to have the titles also be found. So I called up John Ashbery. There's a backstory here. It wasn't quite a cold call. And I asked him if he would create titles for me. And my project was that I would then make the paintings for the titles he created, that the titles would precede the paintings. And John created for me 44 titles. And over 8 years, I made 64 paintings for his 44 titles. This is a title called Soar Models. In the end, I made 5 Soar Models paintings. But they ended up being the first abrogations of my strict palette, the first shaped paintings, the first mixed media paintings. This has silver leaf underneath, this has copper. But I was so fixated on, can I make a painting that has a genuine relationship to John's title, I didn't think about any of these other changes. On the left-hand foot, there's two hands holding a strip of two metals and a little glass of water. It's a homemade battery. And that is, in my mind, sort of a metaphor for the whole piece. It's about, can you create a circuit of energy running through these two discrete objects? That's a little out of... This is the National Cigar Dormitory. Now, if I were making my own titles, I would never make a painting called the National Cigar Dormitory. So my job became that I had to put a house-like structure together with something national, together with something cigarish, which I was actually able to do. You can see in the lower left, I'm kind of lurking outside of the window of this house. Then there was a title called You Saw It First Here, which has a kind of like huckstery, salesman-y kind of tone about it. So I mined the ads in the back of comic books. Then there was a title called Mad Elga, which I used the rules of a medieval game and pretended that Mad Elga was this recurring woman with a masked figure and organized the painting according to the rules of the game. So I could give a lecture on this. It's quite complicated. This is a title called Long Black German Heels and Back Areas. So, you know, some of them I think he was trying to like say, let's see you do this. So I made the painting on the back of the painting, and I referenced a lot of reverse things and a lot of footy things. There's not too much Germanness in it that I can see. Midwife to gargoyles. Turns out gargoyles aren't just monsters, they're primarily downspouts, and it's related to the word gargle and gurgle. So I had water, medievalness, and baby nursery play all working together. Love You in the Morning is a conflation of eroticism and morningness. So we have this sexy woman wearing coffee and a fried egg. We have some toasters, some grapefruit. It's a trapezoidal painting. And there's an image of me in bed doing puppetry, rhyming with this man next to me with orange juice and a banana. It's like we each have our own puppets. And that's actually taken from a book. I have a collection of 6,000 books, and one of them is Puppetry for Invalids. And this is something Frida Kahlo did, was build a puppet theater in her hospital bed in the hospital. This is a very Frida Kahlo reference. The painting title is Wonderful You. And there's all kinds of little Frida references in it, and big overt Frida references too. This is the Soapstone Factory. It's a great example of how the title led me into something completely new. It's a painting about sculpture. It's a finished painting about unfinished sculpture, and it's a colorful painting about monochromatic sculpture. I loved this title in the end, and I ended up making 5 of these. This is number 5. You can see I have the men organized by hair type, so I have Picasso and Gandhi on the outside, and Warhol and Einstein in the center. And if you look closely, you'll see next to each image the detritus of what the materials were that made that image. This is the last one. I think it's the last one, or very close to the last one. It's called Contra Z. And I sort of conjugated all these Z words and used the lens of the alphabet to put images together. So I have a zebra wearing a zinnia, a hummingbird going into a heart, Buddha in a bucket, etc. After this was over, everyone was saying to me, what are you going to do now? But luckily, I got a show at the Whitney Philip Morris, it was called in those days. Then it became the Whitney Altria. Now I don't think it exists at all. And when I walked into this space, it reminded me of a theater. So I made one big painting in 18 pieces, and it's called Backstage, Secrets of Scene Painting. I now see it as kind of a metaphor for my whole way of working. On each side, there are layers of realities. There's a whaling scene, you see a fraction of, and in front of that is a country lane, and in front of that is a Japanese opera, and ditto on the other side, there's a mangrove swamp, and then there's a drawing room, etc. And in the center, there are all these things. You see Lincoln and Warhol ready to be deployed. And then, like at the top, you see the woman from here and the bear from here are together in another place. So it's kind of like it's like if you looked at my paintings over time. Then I made a small series of works that were all rebus paintings, so they used language and pictures. This actually is titled Some Species Like It Hot, and on the left-hand side it says Charles Darwin, and on the right-hand side it says Marilyn Monroe. You have to kind of trust me on that. And then I made a series of paintings that were fictional maps and constellation maps. And then I made, one of John's titles was Prevents Furring, and I made a box-shaped painting, and I invented an herbal remedy. So my painting was the packaging for a product that wasn't inside of it. And that spawned a small series of works called Shanghai Costumes that are box-shaped paintings that costumes would come in. This actually was a commission for this famous vineyard in France called Lynch-Bage. And the text, which my sister-in-law, who was Chinese, helped me with, says clown costume for winemakers, kimono costume for winemakers. And when it went over to Lynch-Bage, I could tell they thought it was really obscure and weird. But now, all the people that come to Lynch-Bage who want to learn how to make great wine are Chinese. So now they think I was like this totally prescient person. This is an emphasis on painting, this talk today, but somewhere in these years, I fell deep down this rabbit hole of photography. And I've been making photography now for 15 years, small, black and white, silver gelatin prints. They're made through a process of collage. They're made through found photographs. I now own 20,000 vernacular photographs that I've found at flea markets, etc. And that completely changed the kind of painting I wanted to make. So I've been making these paintings I call the Dazzle Paintings. They're made on a surface of mica, which lies over a substrate of plexiglass, behind which is a kind of terrarium of angled reflective material, sort of like a lost hiker with a mirror on a mountaintop. So as you walk around in front of the painting, you have this completely conditional experience. It's gleaming at you in totally different ways from the right, then the left, then the center. So it's a very interactive process. It's almost like if you're not looking at the painting, it isn't what it is. And I'll leave you there, but it occurred to me, this is one of my favorite Dazzle paintings, that it's very related to the painting upstairs, this idea of a person wearing another body. I have a small collection of women joking around at the beach with these Barbie figure kind of bathing towels, and that's where I got the image for this painting, but it kind of relates to this idea of the clown inside the other clown. So I'm getting to the end here. I'm being flashed the final signs, and it's a process for me. I don't know what I'll be doing 5 years from now. I would have never thought I would be making photography. I would have never thought I would be making the Dazzle paintings. I didn't see the Ashbury thing coming when I was doing the number thing. To me, that's the pleasure and privilege of being an artist, that you can do so much exploration and so much change and commit to like your own curiosity. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Those were wonderful. It was astounding to have the opportunity to hear from both of you. So what I'm going to do, like our other moderators, is I've got a couple of questions to get the conversation going, and then we'll turn it over to questions from the audience. I know we do have a lot of students in the audience, and so I wanted to start with a really general question to each of you. And even though it's a general question, I don't think it's that easy. I was wondering if you could share with us the moment when you decided you were an artist. And what was that like? What was going on in your life? And was that an easy decision?
Did I?
Have you decided that yet?
I could go. There are many, many moments, but there's one moment that comes to my mind when I saw the question in your email. I had already committed to getting an MFA in art, and I had put myself through school, so it wasn't like I was working, it was hard. So you could argue that I had quite a commitment. This was out in Madison, Wisconsin. But then I had this moment of panic after I got my MFA. I was really afraid of being poor and afraid of not being able to support myself and really kind of worried about everything. So it's going to sound crazy, but I decided to go to law school. So, yeah, nobody knows this. I never bring it up. So I ran to the bookstore and I bought this book called How to Prepare for the LSATs. And I had 4 days, and I holed up in the library, and I studied really hard, and I got into the University of Wisconsin Law School. I wrote an essay saying I wanted to be an intellectual property lawyer. I wasn't lying. In that week, I did want to be an intellectual property lawyer. And then I bought all the books. The books were like $1,000. And I went to class. I was even the first person called on in the first class, which was like kind of weird. And then we had lunch, and I was on Bascom Hill, and there was a big oak tree, and it was a species of oak where the leaves are very lobed. Do you know what I'm saying? So you can put two leaves together like that and almost build something. And I started to build these little sculptures with the oak leaves. And fast forward like 25 minutes, I'd made like 7 of them. And then I had this nail file, and I was slitting little holes in them and balancing the stems in there, so I was like cantilevering, and I just thought, this is a really bad sign. Yeah. And then I went home that night, and I thought to myself, I don't want to be a great lawyer. I'm not looking to get on the Supreme Court, it's the chicken shit part of me that wants to be a lawyer, and that I should do something that I could bring my full passion and intellect and energy to, that I wanted to be great at, that I respected enough to put my whole heart and soul into it. So I quit the next day.
Wow. And Bahar, have you had the moment yet?
I'm figuring it out. I hope I had a fun story like you, but it's not that fun. Just a little background that we had like this conversation at lunch with students. Sorry if it's repeating. But I grew up in an artist family, so it's kind of like it was no question or choice around it. It was like the way of being. So I didn't have any other thoughts or notions that you could be engineer, for example, because I didn't see any engineer around me at all, or doctor or lawyer. So in my mind, when I wanted to go to college, and before that in art school, because you could just go instead of high school to art school, which I went to art school, I thought like everybody does that. I didn't know that there are other people. And then there was a moment that we were talking today at lunch that it was the moment that I had to decide graphic design or painting. So in my, I was like 17, 18 years old, and I wanted to go to college, and I wanted to make money and have a better life in my mind. So I said, I go to graphic designing so I can get some jobs. And I brought it up for my father, and my father said, oh, no, it's the other way around. It's not like you go to do something to make money. You go to something that you like, and the money comes to you.
Wow.
So
That unusual father.
I'm still waiting, though. I'm still waiting. I don't know if it was right. But at the moment that and then I went to painting, BA, MA in painting, like everybody knows all these stories, how it works. But there are a couple of complex things. Sorry, everything is complex about me and my my society and my background. But not only the art was kind of like the trajectory of like how you live after Islamic Revolution for women. It was like the thing that we could do privately and be satisfied, be expressive as a young person, and it still has an output that nobody can arrest you because you don't have to show it publicly. And if you wanted to show publicly, you had your ways. So that was kind of like a language of bringing out all the resistance and angst and all these things. And the real moment that personally touched me, that I just went to studio and I torn apart all the canvases with all the wild colors, it was the moment that I lost my father.
Yeah.
So, sorry. But it's a good, happy ending now.
Yes, exactly. So speaking of colors, I often joke that colors range from wild horses to tame bunnies. And in your color, each of you tend toward the wild horses side, sort of the rambunctious side. That is, neither of you shy away from attempting to harness bright, vivid, saturated colors in your work. What is that like? Do hue and saturation ever get the best of you? Do they take over?
Color is an extremely subjective thing, right? It's very, very hard to really discuss why. I've never made a painting that I didn't see in my mind almost clearly before I made it. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't deviate at all from the initial vision, but like every painting I've ever made, I see it almost like a slide dropped into the projector in my head. It's kind of the easiest part of my job. And it comes to me in the colors in which it exists. Like, I don't sit back and think, oh, the red bird, maybe it should be blue. Do you know what I mean? That would seem very arbitrary to me. A lot of times I like to have a color on top of another color. It's sort of like a person inside a person. So it's like a red that's over an orange that's over an alizarin. So it's like got this kind of complexity to it. But I don't really intellectually probe my sense of color. It's odd to me because now I spend a lot of time making small black and white photographs, and a lot of people have said to me, how come you don't make color photographs? You're such a color person. Right. I don't really have a good answer for that. That's just, I don't know. It's about the conceptual relationship to factuality that I'm trying to plumb with the photographs. Works better with black and white. But with the paintings, I feel like paint, it's sort of an amazing and yet very primitive thing. Like, I love to cook. Painting is a lot, Mondrian called painting cookery, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like you open that jar of the cadmium red and it's like pouring saffron out of a jar. You know, you just look at it and think, wow, I get to have all this, you know? And I don't know, it's just kind of a subjective thing. When I first moved to New York, all the serious painters were guys and they made kind of gray paintings or white paintings or whatever. And even like someone like Elizabeth Murray, people would talk about her buoyant color, and there was like something a little snide about it, you know? Like there was a book written called Chromophobia. The idea is like, you like color, you must be stupid, you know? But I mean, it's true, that's a bias in the art world, but I'm one of the people that likes color. I like hot food. I mean, it's like, you know, like you're kind of, it's like, it's almost a native thing.
You got the light side, now the dark side. That's how this panel works. So I appreciate that. That's fun, inspiring. I have to think about it more, but my immediate response can be if I analyze myself here in front of you, I don't know. I think the way that I grew up, it comes with the color of saffron and sun and earth, and everything is colorful. Rose garden, fig trees around, and all this dreaming. It's warm, it's colorful when I close my eyes. When I open it, I grew up in a completely gray hue of a society, because when I was 7, Islamic Revolution happened. And with that, color got cut from the society. And now I think back about it, and I know why I think about it, because I moved to America, and I realized how gray and brown and black I am. And I mean, I am brown, but in my, color palette. And it was very explicit, the reactions that I got in America, like very, very confronting, explicit. I got encountered like, why no color? And I didn't know why, but I knew like, I don't need it. It was like, because I functioned from 7 years old to 28 years old in school and everywhere, that they're like, tone it down, don't come with the uniform that is got like a little bit, like, oh, God forbid, a pink. No. Like, so it's just that kind of visual range that it made maybe my painting, except the moment that I explained to you, that I got through that. And I started also the botanical approach to my work. But then when I moved to America, I got very criticized with the muddy palette of color, and many dealers and galleries literally came to my studio and they said, sorry, we don't know what to do with this. It's just very muddy. And I think like gradually and naturally, I started to find other hues in myself and my work. And also like the concept of the garden that I started, it goes back to many references of botanical, historical signifiers in the colors, that now I'm a little bit colorful.
I was going to say, it's hard to believe seeing your painting upstairs, how saturated with color that is. Do I have time for one more question before I turn it over? Okay. So each of you have embraced in related ways images as text almost. That is, you include pictures that can be read. These are often refer to ideas that are outside of the canvas itself, sort of off-camera ideas. Jane, you've mined specialized books and manuals and catalogs to create your own private vocabulary. And Bahar's sources include a range of references from government texts. We're all very familiar, once again, with the redacted image of text, to Iranian architectural renderings. So could you please each discuss how you incorporate these external image systems, make them your own, and how you wrestle with issues of reception for all of us? That is, how is your work understood when it is both personal and coded, but also in a public sphere?
But think for a minute about thinking. You can't really think about thinking without thinking about something. So, like every day, you get information from books, from television, from observations as you walk down the street, from overhearing other people's conversations, etc. Your experience in life is not all interior. Your experience is filled with the color of these chairs, your coat. Someone says your name to me next week, I'll picture this coat in my mind. So the idea that I make a painting that incorporates collaging this child's drawing from 50 years ago with this alchemy formula, with this puppetry diagram, that's what's actually going on in my head, right? That is my reality. That is personal. The personal is also composed of the extra personal. You know, as we all live in the world and have experience and drive cars and wear wedding rings and wear ties, etc., all these things are part of our lives. So I don't actually almost make that distinction. You know, what I try to do is bring things together in a way that's other than just merely listing them or compiling them. I try to bring things together where, for me, they're synergistic and kind of magical. I never make a painting where I'm just like throwing shit up there like in some random way and like hoping it means something to you. It always means something like really specific to me. I'm sophisticated enough to know it's not going to mean the same exact thing to you. But I have this belief that if it's real to me, and by real I mean granular and particular to the nth degree, that it will be more likely to hook into some aspect of something in your brain and be resonant and magical for you too. And for me, that magic, it's like, who was it? William Carlos Williams, he said, no ideas but in things. In other words, things in the world and the psychology of our being, they flow back and forth into each other. There isn't that separation. And part of what being an artist is like that elision and that porosity is part of your job.
Interesting that you say that. I think I have a very blurry relationship with language. And I think it's because that I left my language and I adopted another language. There is a kind of some sort of abstract relationship with language, and I live in another language that is not my own language. And it's not just only about like reading or communicating or talking, it's about like living in language. I think Heidegger said that language is your home. And I try not to believe that because I want to feel home. And it is home, but in a very limbo way. And ironically, when I go back to Iran, I'm not fluent as the way that I used to. And not like I'm not fluent in my accent or anything, because, you know, I didn't accomplish really in English either. But it's just like this kind of, there are some concepts that hanging out there that is like very like related directly to the way you think and way you function. So it's not about language, it's about like some sort of seeing thing. It's like the culture. And so I think my solution with that is like being more playful with it and bringing it to my work as like changing the perception about the language. So I have like many series that you saw recently in that gallery in New York that it's got like might be English, might be Hebrew, might be Farsi, because I just changed it a little bit to bring that perception. Yeah.
Terrific, thank you. Should I turn it over to questions? Okay, let's turn it over to questions if anybody has questions. I've got more that I can ask, but I really would love to. This is an astounding audience. I know so many of you, and I know that there's a great opportunity to have some questions. You, sir, with a hat, and then I'll get to you. Wait, we have to get a microphone. Nice hat, by the way.
How much have self-imposed rules and regulations in the production of your work has fueled it moving forward? And basically what I'm getting at is within art, if you make what seem to be arbitrary rules, they actually allow you to expand exponentially in the creation of your own language, whereas students of art tend to at first glance think those are very limiting. And at this time, I'm a photographer, but when Photoshop was developed, part of what it made, you know, all these different creative things possible also made production really difficult because nothing was definitive. It could go backwards, it could go forward, sideways. There was no sort of definitive moment where you had to make a mark and move forward. And you don't seem, even though you made these rules up with images and language, I mean, it's amazing the amount of creativity that was spurned from those rules, which is,
Well, I mean, one thing you could liken it to is a game, right? Where on the one hand, you have a certain number of constraints, and then on the other hand, your job is to explore all the possible freedom within those constraints. Another thing you could liken it to is a poetic form, like a sonnet or a villanelle. It's like you can still write any kind of poem you want, but I know a lot of poets, they really like those forms because they feel like because of the constriction, they actually discover something they wouldn't discover if they had all the freedom of a, free verse situation. So that balance of rules and stricture and freedom and expansion is something that turns me on. It's like if I cook, I'll often open the book and have a recipe. I'll kind of like half-ass follow it, And in some ways I'm like, that's not a good idea. I've got a better idea. But I'm like reacting to it, So I understand that. I don't know about your point about Photoshop. It does allow you to change the image that the camera took, but it can't do everything.
well, I think like the more you rely on conceptual, like your black and white work, the less aesthetics that are in the work, the more it relies on the conceptual fabric that you've created, and vice versa.
I guess. I mean, I feel like conceptual art is not very good if it doesn't like engage you on some sense level. If it's boring to look at, it's like the Solowit wall drawings, they have a conceptual premise underneath them, but they're kind of ravishing to look at. If they weren't ravishing to look at, it would just be like an idle kind of mental exercise. It wouldn't be art.
And Bahar, for you?
It's about the privilege too. We shouldn't forget that I experienced having just one kind of paper, one kind of surface, and one kind of color, if there was any color paint around. So when you go through like an 8 years war and then, the aftermath of it, you're just happy that you have a pencil and you can just like really go around and be creative and innovative with one pencil and one paper. So I remember when I came to America, I was shocked with the amount of like the diversity of the materials. And I always, when I go visiting the schools and teach, I always highly have in my list of practice for students that put aside everything that you have in your studio. Go with one single thing that you have around. Might be like a stick that you come from garden. Just see what you can do with that. I think that just really brings another perspective of using art material or art supply. It's just like, it drives me crazy if I go to art supply here.
Just before we get to the next question, I wanted to say, I went to a Catholic school undergraduate, and a monk, a priest, once told me about the incredible liberation of monastic life. And it took me a long time to catch on to what that was, but that freedom by having limited choices, it's really infinite, and I think that both of these guys are getting at that as well. So I'm sorry, yes? With the yes, blue shirt? Okay, yes, or, no, go ahead, go. We'll get to somebody in the blue shirt.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for these wonderful talks and this great discussion. And Bahar, it's wonderful to see you again. I'm thrilled that you're doing an actual physical garden, and I wondered if you could talk a little about the politics of that.
I'm very happy to talk about that. So the idea is when it happens, hopefully between 3 to 5 years, with the support of everyone. So it's gonna be a community garden in terms of like I invite many people to come and help me to build it. And then I have this kind of idea that it has to be planted native and immigrant flora, so we can talk around about what is native, what is immigrant flora. There are many of events that is happening in this garden year-round, hopefully, that there are informative talks and panels with other artists and creative people or scientists, sociologists, activists, that they come together around a Persian pool, metaphorically, and we talk about like difficult issues. I'm trying to do make a rose garden that is in correspondence with the rose garden in White House. So whatever happens in the White House and it gets announced, we have like our own artists, activists, people that they come to my rose garden and we discuss that, or we have like, So there are many, many ideas like the timeline that I showed you that I did here at the hood, the timeline of the coup that happened in Iran, it goes with a different type of plants. So you learn about the coup that happens through those plants. So it's more pictorial, it's more healing, and it's not like hurtful. So I'm trying to welcome everybody from any walk of life to the garden, not necessarily like people that they want to be political. Of course, if you're a teacher and you want to bring like your students, you can come and just sit and contemplate around the reflective pool. But there are some other options, hopefully.
Okay, yes.
Jane, you like to portray a person within a person, but what about the authentic identity of that person? Or is that not of an issue? Do you see it more as living in the moment and the moment changes, so the identity changes?
Sometimes when I give a longer talk, I make the point, and I'm not saying this is true for you, but for me, that we're all sort of different people, I mean, sometimes you have this experience, like you first start dating and you have this boyfriend, and then you suddenly see your boyfriend with his mother, and he's like a completely different person than he is with you. And I started thinking about that and realizing, like, I'm a different person with my mother than I am with my brother, than I am as a teacher, than I am as a lover, than I am as a colleague, And so I'm not saying like, oh, there's no such thing as authentic personhood. That would be like such a sweeping statement. I would never make it. But I think the elasticity and multifaceted quality of our identity feels more real to me than some essentialist, authentic notion of the self.
Great. Other questions? I was going to say, anybody dare to ask a question now? You have to understand we're close friends. I get away with this. That was a wonderful response. I'll ask one of my, how are we doing for time? Can I ask a question?
Oh, and speaking of which, I'm actually Pat Steer today.
Right.
To that very point. I see people looking in the brochure, and you see, like, I'm Pat, because Pat got sick, so.
Yes, but
I thought that was funny.
But look, so if there's not another question, I'm happy to take it, or I've got one.
Going once.
Okay, we do. We have a question.
Red shirt.
Great.
Thank you. That was great. So I'm fascinated by this idea of creating a system for painting to escape commodification, because as we know, often when artists try to escape commodification or institutionalization, it gets re-commodified and re-institutionalized anyway. You still have this very distinctive style that came from that system. And of course, that has evolved over time, so I'm wondering how you've reconciled that. And I am also thinking about this morning and that idea of fetishization as a comfort and as a way to sell yourself. And of course, you have to sell yourself because you have to make a living. So I'm just thinking about those ideas and wondering about your thoughts on that.
If you can sell yourself, you're lucky.
I think you do better in the marketplace if you have a more readily identifiable body of work. I mean, I could give you millions of examples, but I know that's true. At the same time, what you want to do as an artist is not make a lot of money. I mean, I feel like I'm a person who could have made money in another field. You know, like if money was what I wanted, I wouldn't be here today, you know? So what you want as an artist is to have your cake and eat it too. You want to make enough money. The whole point of making art is to keep on making art. It's not really even the objects. I was telling a story at lunch of how I made these 14 paintings and I shipped them to a gallery on a Thursday night, and Saturday morning they all burned up, you know? But it wasn't like I was back to where I was before I made the paintings, because I had the experience and the forward motion of making all those paintings. I was a different painter than I was 14 paintings later. So what I want to do is what I want to do. And I think I'm very lucky that I've gotten to do it and had enough success that I'm able to do what I want to do. And to me, that's like the biggest victory of all, you know, that you can look out there, that you can be like, I joined my gallery as a person that made large, colorful paintings. Now I'm making small black and white photographs. That's their problem. That's not my problem. So I don't know. I mean, of course you have to be somewhat commodified and you have to do all these things that aren't in what you thought was your original skill set, you know? But it's a little like public speaking. It's horrible the first 20 times you do it. You're almost throwing up. But after you've done it 100 times, you're okay with it. And the money thing is sort of the same way. You get used to it. It's just something like you have to paint your house every few years. You can't exist without dealing with money, right? I mean, you got to somehow be able to talk about it, be able to say no, be able to say yes, you know, whatever. Is that an answer to your question? Okay.
I don't make a lot of money of my paintings, just don't take it wrong. But I also think like we all live in a very capitalistic system. So it's kind of like I feel like we shouldn't ignore or deny that. I'm trying to be aware of how this happens. It's more complicated than like this just one question and one answer. But what I know is like I don't think that it's the time anymore to think as an artist as someone that can't make money or can't make a lot of money, because it's like a culture producer. And and if there are some other factors and elements in the society works well, they can come to the picture and makes this person a value that it's, deserves, or it should be, or it's the price of that. So there are many other nuances of this, but yeah, I can say like you can commodify your work very well, and you should. Why not?
Okay, we've got time for one more question. Yes.
Hi, thank you both so much for this. Now, I'm just kind of curious, are either of you concerned at all with the legacy that you're going to be leaving one day? Maybe not. I don't know.
Silence and laughter, that's the beginning.
Let's make it happen.
Actually, John is the only person I've ever talked about this with. Maybe I have some concern about it, but okay, one way my concern about legacy is manifested is like, I'm really into being in museum collections. That's my favorite thing. That's better than anything. I'm in 75. I want to be in 100, because I feel like then your work stays there and a lot of people see it. And with private people, I don't know, it kind of moves around. Sometimes you can lose track of it, whatever. And then I feel like the future is the problem for the future. I'll be dead. People oddly can rediscover, like, look at Hilma af Klint, It's like, I've been talking, nobody has ever known who she was. Now everybody knows who she is, People are like, it's so on Instagram, it's kind of like, too late to Instagram her. You should have been onto that 2 months ago, So it's like, it's unpredictable. You can't control it. I feel like I'm lucky to already be in so many museums. And you could drive yourself. I have artist friends that are like, all they talk about is their legacy. I'm like, you're not dead yet, It's like, I'm a little concerned about it. I try to do things the right way. I have a book where I have where I know where every painting I've ever made is, and where it's been shown and where it's been written about, etc. People always marvel at it. It's very easy to do. I don't know what other people do. But I'm not driving I feel like when I'm dead, and me dead is not my problem. It's someone else's problem.
She'll be here all
I'm
week.
not even trying to be...
Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses.
Here I come with my struggles. I even feel heavy for myself. So my struggle really is, especially for the last couple of years, that how I can kind of reclaim or bringing something as a painter, as an abstract painter, to this huge Western abstract art, which we call it Western abstract art. And I am an abstract artist, and it's just always like the moments that I'm like, what am I doing in this ocean of the tradition and legacy of abstract art, which I think it's time that we can, I'm hoping that with working and with bringing some other visual elements that can be the new vocabulary of this lexicon of abstract art, we can just a little bit change it and bring like the attention and the art historian and like rewrite the history. So that's my really like struggle in the studio. I'm practicing a lot. I'm thinking about it a lot, that what I can contribute as an abstract artist that come from a different mindset and different really like textures, different way of like sensing the paints with my hands on the canvas. Like that has to say something. And I really like to leave something there and just have like other people that they can have their voice also louder too.
Can I say one more thing about that? The question of your legacy is kind of kissing cousins with the question of how is history created? Who writes history? And it used to be that you would go to the library and you would discover an artist that lived before you. You would discover them because they had written a book. There was a book written on them. The book was written on them because there was a consensus already that that person was important, or the book wouldn't exist. One of the great things about the internet now is that there's information on all kinds of artists. There's information on artists who have never even had a show, And that's going to stay there, and people are going to be able to discover people who, publishers will never write books about. It's flatter, as Tom Friedman would say, and it's more open, and it's kind of a thrilling, development that people can write you from Turkey, and the minute I had a website, this woman wrote me from Wales, and the next week a woman wrote me from Turkey. I was like, this is amazing. They would never find me through the art world, So I think that in a way, some of the pressure is off because the world is flatter now, and people are going to discover other people in the future in ways we can't even imagine.
Well, with that, I'd like to say that Bahar and Jane's legacy is firmly established after this panel. Was it for nothing else but this panel? So, thank you both. That was absolutely wonderful.